a man, who they say he murdered 3. Strange things have happened there. No stranger would it be if we met at midnight in the hanging tree.
Welcome to the show. I'm your host, Chris James. I see another company with too many shops already is trying to insert themselves into Laredo with another coffee shop. At one time, Organic Man Coffee Trike was the one and only. Those fishy people from Washington managed to open about 300 coffee shops all over Laredo. Some were right across the streets from each other. It didn't take long to close about 294 of them. As folks worked at the Organic Man, they learned how to make coffee. Well, some of them decided to branch out on their own. How difficult could it be to run your own company? A lot of people don't realize there's a lot more to it than just putting coffee in a cup. We have about 10 local coffee shops and a few of these mega brands. You choose what you want to do with your money. Support a local business or send your hard-earned cash to some mega store in some other state or maybe some other country. As far as I'm concerned, the Organic Man Coffee Trike is where I do my coffee buying. Unless they're closed, in which case I do have to go with one of the other companies. The best coffee in the universe can only be found at one place, 4501 McPherson. If you can't get there from wherever you're at, go to organicmancoffeetrike.shop. Coffee makes the world go round. If not, we'd all fly off into outer space. Before I get into the cryptid stories, here's a little bit about me. I get a kick out of some folks who believe that their opinions are not only extremely important, but they have some kind of duty to spread it around like fertilizer. I get comments always on Facebook, correction, YouTube. I always get those two mixed up for some reason. It's always on YouTube saying I talk about myself too much. Or I keep telling too many personal stories. I was texting with Kyle Filson from the Expanded Perspectives one night, and we were talking about how funny it is that you put out a absolutely free podcast and people will complain about it on YouTube. Too bad it's my show. After all, my name is in the title. So here's a little bit of advice for anybody out there who's about to have a root canal. I just had one. You want to keep your calendar open all day before the big event. I was given an appointment for 4:45 p.m. The night before, they called saying there had been a cancellation. Could I move it up to 2:30? Of course I could move. I wasn't in any hurry to get into the chair. I was in a hurry to be done with it. The day of the appointment, I got another call asking if I could come in at noon. The sooner the better. At Fort Knox, when we went into the gas chamber, I ran to get to the front of the line. Get in, die a little, and then get out. If you've never been through the gas chamber, I give it a 1 star. Highly not recommended. I arrived at the dentist's office early, and don't you know, I was ushered right in. Major bit of advice here. As you walk in, ask if you could go to the bathroom before they start. Even if you don't really have to go, go anyway. I was in that chair for 2 hours and 45 minutes. I had drunk a pot of coffee before I arrived. And think of that scene from The Right Stuff. Scott Glenn is portraying Alan Shepard. He was supposed to climb in and be shot into outer space within a few minutes. 4 hours later, once he'd ruined his spacesuit, NASA fired him into space for all of 5 minutes. I was uncomfortable for the last hour or so. Try to think happy thoughts. Don't focus on what's going on inside your mouth. Think about, I don't know, kittens or puppies. Think about what you're doing tomorrow and not right now. Absolutely do not think about the movie The Marathon Man. Is it safe? If the doctor had said that when he walked in, I'd have jumped out of the chair and ran. Be the best patient the staff has ever seen. Smile if you can. Try to not cough or drown. Don't squirm, and if you feel a sudden sharp pain that goes all the way to your toes, think of it as building character. That which does not kill you will make you hurt all over. Don't bite anyone. If you have to bite somebody, try to go after a werewolf. That made me wonder, if you bite a werewolf, will they turn into a human? Something to think about. Lastly, thank everybody. Tell them, even though you hated being there, you were happy with what they did. Just keep in mind, modern medicine has improved dramatically since the Dark Ages. You might have to come back someday. You want the staff to like you. I set out to find some lesser known cryptids, the ones few folks have heard about. Not an easy task sometimes. Most search engines today are pregnant with links that take you to websites with zero relevance to what you're looking for. For example, I was looking for information on a cryptid known as the Agula'aq. I hope that's how it's pronounced. Instead of monsters, I was offered hundreds of links to some singer that I'm not a fan of. The search folks must think I can't spell or I don't really know what I'm looking for. Big companies give the search folks money to be sure that their ads get first mention as you search, even if they have zero to do with what you're looking for. To alleviate the confusion, I put encrypted in the search term. This allowed me to pursue hundreds of sites on cryptids, but not the Aholuk. I did stumble upon the Anguilla peluda, the hairy eel, which is a cryptozoological figure found in the Canary Islands. This is a mysterious eel that inhabits a pool in Punta de Anaga. Soon the locals began calling the pool the Charco de la Angula. The locals were terrified of this beast, and they sought out the church to deal with it. A priest performed an exorcism on the pool, and the monster hasn't been seen since. Still not what I was looking for. As I searched, I did find a site talking about the Ala'aq. Yeah, it's one of those words. Or maybe it's the Arula'aq. aka the Alaskan Bigfoot, Agula'aq, Alaskan Bigfoot. I've done several shows about Bigfoot, as well as just about every podcast out there that deals with weird things. It helps not at all that some of these creatures' names are unpronounceable, like the Aulak. The person who translated the name from whichever language or dialect had to guess on how to do so. Or they added a bunch of dashes and hyphens or several punctuation marks that most folks don't even use anymore. I did manage to track down one story about the Ahulak. I call this witness Quinn. If you don't get that reference, you're just too young. Quinn grew up in Kodiak, an island off the coast of Alaska, with a small town and a couple of small villages scattered about the island. You can't get there in a car unless you take the ferry or you fly. There's not much to do there other than fish, and for the young kids, the place is pretty much dead. Quinn would hang out with his friends from school and do the things that kids do with little to do. Oh, they would hang out and they would smoke cigarettes or maybe sometimes something a little bit stronger. They would go for a hike, and at the end of the hike, they would hang out and smoke some more cigarettes and maybe something a bit stronger again. Being kids, Quinn thought it would be a great idea to scare the heck out of his friends. The native Alutiiq elders told stories of the Aholuk, which were similar to skinwalkers. These beings were once humans who were cast out of the village, and they turned to black magic in order to survive. Like the Yi Naldalushi, you weren't supposed to talk about them. On very rare occasions, the subject would come up, which made not talking about them extremely hard. What caused all this death and destruction? Well, it must have been something else. Everyone in both Navajo and Alutiiq tribes knew what these beings were and what they would do to you if you drew their attention to yourself or your family. As Quinn and his friends, Tommy and Gaspar, I know Gaspar is not an Alutiiq name. I couldn't remember any other names I'd heard over the years. We did have one or two native Alaskans in the Border Patrol. Now, that was some time ago. Okay, Quinn, Tommy, and Gaspar were walking through a remote area. Quinn began to tell about all the things that he'd heard about the Ahuluk. Get his friends' minds focused on scary things. They found a nice spot to hang out and smoke, and they used up the last of their cigarettes. Quinn went into great detail on the Ahuluk could impersonate people that they knew and would do so in order to cause all kinds of havoc and maybe try to kill them. In other words, you didn't know who to trust. As the sun was reaching the horizon, the three decided it was time to turn back. Once they reached Tommy's car, Gaspar asked if they could stop at a store so he could buy some cigarettes. In order to make said purchase, Gaspar needed to run into his house and get his money. The three stopped at the house, and in the boy went. Shortly, he came back out, and he said he only had $3, and that was far short from what he needed to get a pack of smokes, and that they were going to part company for the evening, and he would pick up some cigarettes later. Once back home, Quinn was in his bedroom when he got a text message from Gaspar. He wanted to know where the others had gotten. Gaspar said he ran into his room, found his money, walked back out to join the others, but they were gone. Quinn thought Gaspar was trying to be funny, but then worry set in. What if? What if all that talk about the Agula'aq had gotten his unwanted attention to the creature? The text messages went back and forth, and thoughts of some shapeshifter that had impersonated Gaspar grew. The long and the short of it is, had Gaspar been pranking Quinn and Tommy, why did he put himself out of cigarettes just to have fun with his friends? You know how teenagers are. When they want something, they absolutely need it. The longer Quinn thought about it, the more he became convinced that he and Tommy had seen an Aulak. Akullet is a creature from Inuit mythology, particularly among the indigenous people of the Arctic region. It is often described as a mythical sea creature or a shape-shifting creature with the ability to transform between an orca, a killer whale, and a wolf. The Akullet is said to possess the strength and speed of both a killer whale and a wolf, making it a formidable and dangerous creature in Inuit folklore. It is known for hunting seals and other marine animals while in the water, as well as land-based prey when it's in its wolf form. This shape-shifting ability and its status as a powerful and mysterious being make the Akullet a prominent figure in Inuit mythology and stories. The origin of the Akullet creature can be traced back to the mythology and the oral traditions of the indigenous folks in Arctic Circle. Antarctic's the other side of the planet. The Arctic, particularly the Inuit, the Inupiat, the Yupik cultures. These creatures have inhabited the Arctic region of North America for thousands of years, and their stories have been passed down through generations. In Inuit mythology, the Akullet is one of the many supernatural beings that are believed to inhabit the natural world. The description of the Akullet can vary somewhat in different versions of Inuit storytelling. It generally combines features of both a killer whale and a wolf due to its shape-shifting nature. The upper part of its body resembles a killer whale with a sleek, streamlined appearance. It typically has dark coloration, a back and sides, but it's often deep blue from below. The lower part of the body, including its belly, can be white or light colored. The Akullet head is that of an orca with a prominent dorsal fin on its back. Think of a giant wolf with a dorsal fin. It possesses the powerful tail flukes of a killer whale, which it uses for swimming and hunting in the water. In its wolf form, the Akullet takes on the appearance of a large, fearsome wolf. It also will have dark coloration that resembles the coloration of a orca. The Akullet's eyes are often described as glowing with an eerie or a supernatural light. Its size can vary from typically a lot bigger than a normal wolf, all the way up to the size of a small killer whale. The ability to transform between these two forms is the key characteristic of the Akullet. If I'd ever had a desire to visit the Arctic, this creature has thoroughly squashed it. I forgot to turn my phone off. That guy is going to probably call again asking to speak to James Howard. He calls every week. I keep telling him there's nobody here named James Howard. And he's been calling for the last year. As I continued searching for little known cryptids, I did find some cool stories that I decided to use so the show wouldn't be just about me trying to find cool stories. American hunter Edgar Beecher Bronson was in the brush, in East Africa's British colonies when he interviewed Alfred Jordan. Bronson also interviewed many of Jordan's staff. They all agreed on the stories that Jordan was telling. When questioning the locals who lived along the banks of the lake, they told him this beast fish was called a Dingonuk. This is from the turn of the century, not the last one, but the one before that, 1900s. Alfred Jordan was an African hunter from back in the early 1900s. He did have some questionable encounters, but mostly because the boys in the white lab coats, who did all their research from the unexplored wilds of the laboratories, said so. One creature Jordan reported on was called the beast fish, which he was terrified of. It was at least 14 to 18 feet long. It had an enormous head shaped like a leopard or maybe a dog. Some said it had the head of an otter. This monster's favorite food was hippos. It used its strong, wide tail to steer through the currents of the East African rivers. Some reported it had long white tusks, like an walrus or an elephant, and it had an armadillo's impenetrable scales. Its feet were those of a large hippo, but it had hands like a T Rex. I don't know if they were the little bitty T Rex hands or the big ones, but it had hands like a T Rex. Jordan was not the only white traveler to report an encounter with the Dingonuk. In 1900, Clement Hill, the British superintendent of African protectorates, had been aboard a steam-powered launch in the northeastern waters of Lake Victoria when something with a head and neck emerged from the depths and tried to seize a sailor from the bow of the ship. Everyone was certain this was not a crocodile. Other people visiting the lake said they spotted the beast fish floating on a log or sunning on the banks of one of the rivers flowing into Lake Victoria. Vic Hermansen and I read a lot of the same books. One in particular was The Eyelids of Morning about Lake Victoria and all the crocodiles that live in it. I believe I loaned my copy to my mother, and when she died, one of her friends took it. I did say I just wanted her photographs, and maybe I should have thought of some of the other things that she had, like that giant trilobite fossil that now somebody else has. You don't think about things like that when you're cleaning up after a death. Dingonecks are said to live in the tributaries of Lake Victoria, such as the Victoria Nile and the river Jinga in Uganda. The second most dangerous animal in Africa is the crocodile. The one that kills the most humans is the hippopotamus. You know, the one I want for Christmas. Dingonecks eat hippos for breakfast. The only reason they don't eat many humans is, well, we don't really know. Maybe we taste funny. There were a few reports of unlucky fishermen winding up passing through the creature's digestive tract, but very few witnesses were able to give any details. Most of what is known in the English speaking world today of the indigenous people's beliefs about the Din on neck comes from the records of these same white explorers and colonial administrators. In those second and third hand accounts, the creature sometimes, and perhaps incorrectly, also is referred to by non indigenous writers interchangeably as Umani or Luquata. Still looks frightful, but its presence often portends good fortune and a good harvest. A thriving herd is also to be had if you spot a that creature, a ding on neck. It's one of those words. It's African. If, on the other hand, you do not see one of these beast fish, you're bound to have ill fortunes and bad weather is coming. The indigenous communities feared the white explorers and hunters more than the Ding-on-X. Those who knew the beast fish believed explorers had killed the creature with the purpose of making them victims of a dreaded plague. This happened about the time that Jordan had shot at a Dingonuk in around 1908. Just after that happened, a deadly sickness swept through the community on Lake Victoria's northern shore. In 2003, at least 3 people were killed by an unidentified animal in a remote area of Malawi. 16 others were badly injured. Officials said the animal was a rabid hyena. However, eyewitness accounts and expert analysis have come out that makes this explanation untenable. Attacks on villagers in Dawa district are thought to have begun early March 2003. Dawa is about 60 miles from the capital city of Lilongwe. But as soon as you exit the city, you're pretty much in the wilderness. Many areas are sparsely populated and quite mountainous. Officials from Parks and Wildlife Department received word of the attacks from villagers fleeing their homes, seeking refuge at the community hall at district headquarters. More than 4,000 people fled from 4 mountainous villages. They were telling stories of a large, aggressive animal that was actively hunting people in the region. 2 elderly women and a toddler had been killed by this creature. In each case, their skulls were crushed and their intestines and genitalia were consumed. Sounds like our cattle mutilation. Many of the 16 people that did survive the attacks had extremely severe injuries, including missing legs and hands. At least one woman's face was partially removed, and 2 other victims were blinded. This was the second time in less than a year that an aggressive unidentified animal had terrorized the area. Earlier attacks in August resulted in 5 deaths and 20 severe injuries. That creature was eventually killed by a joint patrol of game rangers, paramilitary police. Officials identified the attacker as a hyena. The folks who had seen the attacks said nay, nay. The creature they saw didn't have that signature sloping posture seen in hyenas. Its back legs were more like those of a huge dog, and it had no spots. Witnesses referred to the attacker as the Malawi terror beast. Some villagers believe that the nature of the attacks, often badly maiming victims but leaving them still alive, did not resemble those of any predator. Instead, they felt the attacks demonstrated a level of deliberate malice. After an investigation into the 2003 attacks, park officials concluded that they were likely again the work of a hyena. However, in this case, the animal was never captured or killed, and animal experts have questioned the likelihood of a lone hyena aggressively attacking entire villages of people. One witness said he thought the creature was supernatural in nature. The same animal that had killed a year earlier resurrected to come back and exact its revenge. A week after fleeing their homes, many of the villagers did return under armed guard. Despite an intensive hunt by park rangers, supported by the police and soldiers, the animal responsible for the attacks was never found. As I looked at dozens of sites, I came across something that I just had to dig into: the deep sea abominable snowman. I checked out several websites, but everybody was referencing the same sighting. Bruce Monier, as he was diving off of Great Isaac in the Bahamas. I'm going to say that again. The deep sea abominable snowman underwater. I think it was last week or 2 weeks ago. I may have said something about how come you never hear about an underwater Sasquatch, and then I found this. In the 1980s, Bruce was being towed behind a boat as he looked for possible wrecks that they could salvage. He spotted a huge, what he described as a turtle. As he looked closer, the creature turned its head and looked back at him. It had a face like a gorilla or an ape. The neck was 4 times as long as it should have been. The eyes looked human, only they were enormous for the size of the head. Bruce got a very good look at this creature as it looked back at him. It suddenly shot away and began as if being propelled through the water using some kind of a hidden machine. A deep sea Bigfoot. Let me see that. The deep sea abominable snowman. That's it. 1785, William Hutchinson wrote about a creature hunting the English countryside. It was given the name the Lambton Worm. He based his stories on folklore handed down over the centuries. The exact location of this giant worm was never mentioned, but the best guess is it's a glacial moraine left over from the last ice age in Fatfield, Washington, about halfway between the British cities of Newcastle and Sunderland. This feature has been known as long as anyone can remember as being named Worm Hill. And it was here that people believed the Lambton Worm once lived. The creature was seen as a menace, destroying the nearby fields and the crops of the Lambton estate. It was down to the Lambton family to deal with this monster. It was on their grounds. The locals all said that Sir John Lambton was the man responsible for the Lambton Worm. The story goes one day a young John Lambton was fishing by the river Weir that flowed near his soon to be inherited estate. He caught a very strange creature with the head of a dragon in the body of an eel. Not knowing what it really was, he discarded the eel like creature in a nearby well, later known as the Worm Well. Young Lambton left his home for many years, becoming a crusader, a knight of Rhodes. The worm John had discarded was not dead, and it began to grow inside the well for all the years that Lambton was not at home. The worm grew so big it reached an enormous size, and it outgrew the well. Once it was able, the worm crawled out of the well, kind of like how Samara popped up, only without the creepy walk or the white gown. The creature began to hang out at the nearby river Weir, hiding underwater near a particular rock. The worm was mostly a curiosity, only eating fish. As it grew, so did its appetite. The worm started to attack and eat cattle and sheep and an occasional child who got too close to the river. The worm soon became extremely dangerous, and the village people and estate inhabitants grew worried about this venomous and enormous serpent like creature. When John Lambton returned from the Crusades, he was a changed man. He had transformed into a brave, daunting knight, strong and noble. That's how they described him. He knew that the worm was the same worm that he had caught years ago, and it was his duty to put an end to this now dangerous creature so that the nearby people could live peacefully. He tried to kill the worm many times, but he failed. The worm, by this point, was too powerful, and no matter how gravely he injured it, the worm would always escape and soon recover. In a last bid to kill the worm, Lambton consulted a witch that lived near his estate. She advised him on how to kill the worm and how to get rid of it forever. Lambton was warned that if he beheaded the worm, it would not die, but the two severed halves would rejoin and it would live again. Lambton was told that he needed to wear armor fitted with razor blades when he went to do battle. As soon as he was close to the worm, it attacked. It came up out of the water and wrapped itself around his body. This was a bad idea, since the entire suit of armor was covered in sharp, pointy things. With each movement, the worm did more damage to itself than the knight ever could. Lambton was able to chop what was left to pieces, which were carried away by the current of the river. When the Lambton Worm was dead, everyone hailed John Lambton as a hero of the hour. And now for the rest of the story. In order for the witch's magic to work, Lambton was told that he must kill the first person he met immediately after vanquishing his prey. The first person to greet him was his father, and Lambton just could not kill him. The witch had warned Lambton that if he failed to kill the first person he saw, his family would be placed under a curse, and the next heirs of the family would not be able to die peacefully in their beds. This meant that they would die in either battle or because of foul play, and not from natural causes and old age. Well, the curse apparently came true, and of the next 9 generations of Lambton heirs, none of them had a peaceful death. If you saw the movie The Lair of the White Worm, 1988, this was kind of based on the original story. Bram Stoker, yes, that guy, wrote a book based on the legend back in 1911. In the movie, you may have recognized Peter Capaldi, as in the 12th Doctor from Doctor Who. Peter is 6 days younger than me, but he makes a heck of a lot more money. In the 50s, a young woman and her two siblings were driving through the countryside. Her sister was in the passenger seat and her brother was in the back. Their exact location was not told, but they were on a two-lane country road with ditches on both sides, and it was lined with trees. It was late in the day, but not yet dark. The driver began to smell something akin to really old garbage or some recently dead big animal. Rounding a curve up ahead, she saw what looked like a bear hunched over in the ditch. It looked like it was eating something, either roadkill or something it had recently killed. She pointed out this bear to her two companions, and they all watched as the car got closer. It soon became apparent that this bear was taller than the car, even though it was hunched over and in a ditch. This must have been one huge bear. When the creature heard the approaching car, it stood up. Now it was towering over the vehicle. They were close enough to make out a lot of details. It was covered in dark, shaggy fur. The only visible skin was the lips, around the eyes, and the ears. The head was sitting square on the shoulders. This thing had no neck. It turned its entire body to watch the car as it went by. Her brother in the back seat kept his eyes on the creature, telling his sisters, "That is not a bear." If it wasn't a bear, what was it? Bigfoot is described as having its head close to its shoulders, but it still has a bit of a neck. It's not a dog man because they do have necks. This thing was some unknown and never before seen or since a kind of cryptid. A young couple were out stargazing in the park. No names were given, so I'm going to call them Dick and, yes, Jane. I hated those books back when I had to read them. It was torture through your eyeballs. I am 100% certain that Joseph Mengele had something to do with writing those books. Run, Dick, run. Who? Who decided that that was a good idea? I don't know. Oh, yes. Dick and Jane were in the park staring up at the sky. As they sat there, Dick thought he heard somebody trying to sneak up on them. The park was in a somewhat sketchy neighborhood, and so he got his guard up. Dick stood up and he moved towards the sound. Not getting too close, just enough to see who or what was stealthily trying to creep up on them. In the darkness, he saw what looked like a person, covered from head to foot in white cloth of some kind, hunched over as if using their hands and feet to move along the ground. It was moving parallel to them, but it was traveling from the thick brush out into the open. Dick watched this thing, and then he asked Jane if she could see it as well. She said yes. This was just too weird, so the couple hoofed it back to the car, and Dick got the engine running. Wondering what the thing was, he flipped on the high beams, but the creature was no longer there. He asked Jane to describe what she had seen, and her sighting was exactly like his. They decided to get out of there, but neither wanted to go back home, so instead they drove to an open field nearby. Not too close, but a few miles. Once there, they got on their stargazing. Within minutes, a black helicopter came flying towards them. It passed right overhead, close enough that they could feel the prop wash. This aircraft made no sound. Plus, it wasn't showing any lights. The helicopter was flying in the direction of the park that they had just left. They both thought whatever that white thing had been, the helicopter was going to check it out, or maybe try to catch it. Perhaps it had escaped from the boys in the black helicopters. In northern New Jersey, a young man, I'll call him John, was walking home at about 3 a.m. Up ahead, he saw movement. Maybe somebody was out walking early in the morning. As he got closer, he could see this was sort of a human shape, but it stood about 9 feet tall. This creature was covered in a white cloth. Sound familiar? John thought just maybe he was seeing the Jersey Devil, except the devil is never described as having on white clothing. Fortunately, John's path of travel wasn't taking him any closer to this thing, so he sped up and moved by as quickly as he could. Once back home, he began searching for any kind of a similar encounters. The closest he could come was the Fresno crawlers. Do I have to describe the crawlers? Okay, just the basics. 2007 in Fresno, California, Jose's dog kept barking at unknown trespassers. Jose put a camera in his front yard and he caught a weird looking thing walking across his yard. The crawler was about 4 feet tall and it looked like a pair of legs with no body above. What John had seen was more than twice as tall. Fresno crawlers have been seen in other locations now, all over Ohio, Yosemite Park, and a few other places. I hate it when I read a really good story, but there's no date, no location. It makes an unbelievable story harder to believe. A woman and her husband were driving home after visiting with some friends. They were on the outskirts of town, but they didn't say what town. There were a few houses around. A human-looking figure darted out from some trees right in front of the car. Her husband had to slam on the brakes, and the vehicle skidded a few feet. They both saw the same image. It looked like a huge man. He was down on all fours as he sped across the street. It only took seconds for this weird guy to go from one side of the road to the other, vanishing into the brush once more. Once more, no date or location, but still an interesting story. Dave was walking his dog through his neighborhood when something got the dog's attention. The dog began to alert and make soft woofing and slight growling sounds. Dave looked to see what was getting his dog's attention. Up in the sky, about 10 or 12 feet up, was a whitish boomerang looking creature. It was not very clear and almost looked as if it wasn't solid. This thing was flying around a house. It went by the house, by the front, and disappeared behind, only to pop back into sight, coming around the far side. This went on for several minutes. The creature circled the house maybe a half a dozen or more times. It looked almost like a small manta ray, but the wings never flapped. It glided around the night, staying close to that one house. Had the dog not seen this creature and the movement, Dave would thought he was just imagining things. Dogs, I don't think, have a very good imagination. At least they never tell me they do. People did try to convince Dave that he had seen an owl or a bat. This thing didn't have any feathers and it didn't look black, it was white. You don't have a whole lot of white bats. There are some, but they're little bitty guys. You don't have big white bats flying around. The edges of this creature looked as if the thing was kind of dissolving into the night, almost like a held together mist that flew around a house for unknown reasons. Fritz was living in Frankfurt, Germany as a small child. On several nights he saw a huge black shape go streaking through the sky. It was bigger than a car, almost human shaped. There was no sound, and the only way to know it was there is if you saw it. Had Fritz been the only witness, it could have been written off as his imagination, but others saw this huge thing as well. Both his parents, as well as the neighbors, all saw this black monster flying overhead. Fritz thinks what he was seeing was some kind of a giant bat that was bigger than a car. Now, that's a lot of bat. It was Batman. No. The Tanzanian island of Pemba in the Indian Ocean is haunted by the night demon, a terrifying creature known as a Papabawa. This bat like creature has the ability to transform, sometimes appearing as a human like figure. Its preferred time to strike is during the night, although there have been a few reports of daytime sightings. The Papabawa is known for its indiscriminate attacks, targeting anybody in its path. Disturbingly, one common narrative involves this spirit sexually assaulting men. The origins of the Papabawa legend can be traced back to a few decades ago. During a period of civil unrest following the assassination of the country's president. According to local belief, victims of the Papabawa attacks must share their experiences with others on Pemba. Failure to do so may result in continued visits from this malevolent entity. Reports of the Papabawa attacks have instilled fear in the local population. Some men started staying awake or sleeping in groups outside of their homes, while others resorted to smearing themselves with pig oil, believing that this could repel the creature's attacks. Umjaka Hamad, a peasant farmer, recounts his encounter with the Papabawa in 1997. Though he couldn't see the creature himself, others in his house witnessed its attack. His family were awoken by the sound of the creature's arrival. Once everybody in the house was awake, they all watched in horror as it did its nastiness to Imjaka. The thing landed on his chest, causing a lot of pain and difficulty breathing. It did its nasty deed and left. Umjaka thinks his lack of belief may have made him a target, suggesting that anyone who doubts its existence could potentially become a victim. A shapeshifter, the Papabawa, can change its appearance. During the day, it masquerades as a regular person. Under the cover of darkness, it shifts into a predatory shape, kind of a Batman looking thing. The Papabawa is a hunched figure shaped roughly like a human. Its skin is gray and it gives off the smell of sulfur. It has long pointed ears, a wide mouth with lots of fangs, large single eye in the center of its forehead that glows in the dark. The creature has a pair of huge bat wings which can wrap around itself like a cape. Some witnesses have described other variations of the monster's appearance. For example, it may have a long tail or feet like a bird. Hmm. It has also been known to turn into animals, or it can turn into a puff of smoke when it has to make a quick getaway. Some people believe the Papabawa is a fame seeking creature. It targets victims who don't believe in evil spirits so that it can violently set the record straight. These same people say it is known for warning its victims. They must spread the story of their attack. If they don't tell everyone, the creature will return and make them suffer some more. Vic, Dave, maybe you should look into the Papabawa. The Papabawa has magical powers, and it uses them to hunt and torture humans. Its single eye can paralyze anyone who gazes into it. Some people look the creature in the eye, they will fall into a trance and thus allow this thing to have its way with them. The Papabawa is a relatively new creature. Tanzania, the monster's home, has a rich tradition of folklore and witchcraft. Many locals continue to believe in evil spirits called Shetani. The new kid on the block seems to be trying to wedge itself into the fears of the locals. The first written record of a Papabawa did not appear until 1965, and it grew into infamy in 1972. The Goro is a creature of American folklore, particularly associated with the Ozark Mountains of Arkansas and Missouri. Often described as a fearsome reptilian beast, the Goro is said to be 20 feet long, with sharp tusks, pointy ridges along its back, and a propensity for mischief and destruction. A mischief maker. The name Go-Ro derives from the sounds that it makes, and its legend has been passed down through oral tradition and local tales. The Go-Ro is often portrayed as a monstrous predator, though its role in folklore ranges from a terrifying menace to an entertaining local myth. Tales of the Go-Ro often emphasize its exaggerated size and dangerous nature. The first widely reported story about the Go-Ro, was in 1890s, describing it as a swamp or a cave-dwelling creature that terrorized livestock and occasionally ate someone. One of the most famous Go-Ro legends comes from Searcy County, Arkansas, where it was described in a cave alongside the skeletal remains of its victims. Reported sightings have been sporadic and anecdotal. Many accounts involve people encountering a massive creature in remote forested or swampy areas, often accompanied by that strange sound that it makes. Ivan T. Sanderson, author and cryptozoologist known for his research into anomalous animals and cryptids, he contributed significantly to the study of cryptozoology through his books, articles, and public appearances exploring creatures like Bigfoot and the Loch Ness Monster. Sanderson' interest in cryptids stemmed from his fascination with the natural world as well as mysteries. Sanderson discussed the Goro in his 1961 book, Abominable Snowman Legend Come to Life. While the book primarily focused on hominid cryptids, Sanderson included a section on other creatures from American folklore. He described the Goro as one of the strangest reptiles said to inhabit remote areas, particularly in the Ozarks around Arkansas. He highlighted the Goro as a local legend, detailing its size, reptilian features, and predatory behavior. While Sanderson acknowledged that many cryptids, including the Goro, were likely born from folklore and misidentification, he also expressed openness to the possibility that some legends might have roots in encounters with real but very rare creatures. Cryptozoologists who study creatures of folklore and legend suggest the Goro could be misidentification of a known species or fabrication born from tall tales. Skeptics, of course, argue that the lack of physical evidence, such as remains or clear photographs, cast doubt on its existence. Show me the body. Could these creatures be real? I'm not going to pretend I have any of the answers. I don't know, and I've never seen any of these. It doesn't mean the witnesses are mistaken or lying. You see something and you can't identify it from any animal that you know of. People aren't as stupid as the boys in the white lab coats would like us to believe. Who's the crazy one here? People willing to say that they saw some unknown creature, or people who pretend there are no unknowns in our world? Si vis possum parabellum. If you want peace, prepare for war. Hope you enjoyed tonight's show. If you did, spread it around, let others know what they're missing. If you didn't like tonight's show, why are you still listening? Until next Saturday, this is Chris James for Strange Things.
Are you coming to the tree where there's strung up a man who they say he murdered 3? Strange things have happened there. No stranger would it be if we met at midnight in the hanging tree.